I think the actual least favorable new face of the league candidate out of I don't know if they're including Jalen Brunson in this conversation, but I think it would be him, despite him being in the biggest market, which is interesting because I think age wise and the fact that he's not. I mean, he is the best player in the Knicks, but people would say in theory they would hope him and Cat would be more of a 1-2 punch. Um, that I feel like he's actually the least of the candidates going forward, but he's in the biggest market. So I think that makes it very interesting. I don't think he will be, but even if he wins the series, I think the NBA would still rather Halliburton over him. But yeah, not just because you brought that up. I'm kind of mulling over these four players and their potential as the face of the league and market wise, and also what the NBA, what's kind of shenanigans behind the scenes might go on to maybe get some of these players in different markets moving forward, which I would not be surprised by if all of a sudden we see Halliburton in I don't know, Miami, for example. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but just in terms of a big market, I think the NBA loves that a little too much.
Right. No, 100%. And I like that you said that about Brunson, because I think Brunson would be a very obvious choice. Obviously, this is the furthest, Brunson has never been, or I will say, Brunson on the Knicks has not made it to a conference finals up until this year. So there's no telling how, how consistently good this Knicks team will be. So it is a little bit interesting. I think time will tell how much they remain in the conversation. But something I think that you have to also take into consideration, Brunson's game is not as attractive as the other stars, or like the other previous faces, Steph Curry jacking up threes. Like, you have kids these days, like on basketball teams out in the parks, man, jacking up threes to get a shot like Curry, right? You have LeBron James, like the athleticism, that's super marketable, right? That looks so good on like a Gatorade ad, right? Or a sneaker ad for Nike. You think about like Kevin Durant, like Slim Reaper, like he is someone who can score in isolation, who can get you a bucket wherever. But he always has that little like pull up jumper, little crossover pull up. It's a nice fluid style of play. And Brunson, I think it's footwork. It's a lot of just like kind of like using his body to create space, and a lot of scoring in the paint. That he definitely has a 3-point shot, but it's not as pretty as like a Curry, or if you compare him to the other like up and coming stars, like it's not as smooth as Shea, right? It's not as versatile as a Jokic. It's not as I guess you could say fluid and attractive as Ant-Man. It's it's nothing like Tatum. So it's very unique. It's effective, but I don't think it's as attractive, and I think that will also play a role in how he gets marketed. And not to mention, he's a smaller guy, right? I believe 6'1". Let me look that up. He's a regular sized dude, man. So he's not like your typical basketball star. He's 6'2". He's 6'2". That's what Google's telling us. But I think all those things are contributing factors to the way that he is marketed, and I think those will all play a role. But
for sure, I think also, I think partially because you said all that, him being in the biggest market, I think I think that's why it can even out. I think maybe for the NBA, that's maybe the best case scenario, at least for them marketing these conference finals. Because I think if they wanted, like obviously for them, they would love like Ant, for example, in New York. Like that would be blockbuster. That would be exactly what the NBA would need to take it into its next generation. But I think Ant, Shea, Cali, especially all of them being in small market teams, like them being as big as they are, raises that level, and then even if you want to say, which I agree, like Brunson is maybe below the level in terms of marketability, but then New York raises the level, then overall the level of the league it kind of evens out, which I think is good for from a fan standpoint. I think that's good. I think for the league, they probably, now that I think about it, probably want all those small market teams to be, at a certain level, and then have those big markets to pop up, like obviously a Luka in LA, for example. So I'm curious. I'm very, very curious to see the next few years what, like I said, what behind the scenes shenanigans go on to make these big markets relevant again.
100%. Yeah, man. And we'll see, man. I think, we were just talking about baseball. Brunson really gives me that Derek Jeter vibe, and I know I'm not the first person to really mention that. It kind of fits a little bit perfect. Captain of the Knicks, captain of the Yankees, but Jeter was also just somebody who was very clean cut. He was PR trained, so he never really got caught in any controversies. He did get caught in some minor ones, but none that were like scandalous in any way, right? But I think sometimes I think there's something to be said about that lack of charisma. And I love Brunson, but he's not Ant. He's not someone who's gonna talk trash for the press, who's just gonna show up and hoop. Nah, like Brunson is gonna do all the right things, and I think that's what you want on your team. That's who I want leading my franchise. But as far as marketability, I think it does take a little bit of a hit there. So I think there's something to be said about that.
And he won A-Rod. At least
No,
the league
exactly.
won A-Rod.
Exactly. I mean, A-Rod's interesting, right? Because A-Rod was caught up in scandals and he got caught in PEDs, for example. But like a David Ortiz, right, who was charismatic, who was very just like out there and like was on a big market, was on the Red Sox, and was really just like instrumental in championship victories, right? Like, yeah, like you want like a David Ortiz. It's hard to really pinpoint someone on the Yankees. Obviously Jeter is at the front of that, but he wasn't like the charismatic person that you really want. Even though he was marketable, it's not like, you're gonna want, like, I don't know. How many times did you see Jeter was a Jordan athlete? I did not see him on too many Jordan ads. He never had his own signature line. I get that's baseball, but I think there's still something to be said about like when you don't have the charisma, the marketability is may not be as high. And while I'm on that note, man, Jalen Brunson deserves a signature sneaker. I know everything that I've just said may contradict that, but I'm a little bit interested, or not interested, but I guess you could say confused as to, I know he has his Kobe player exclusives, he has his PEs, but I think it's time that he gets his own signature line. But that's a conversation for another day.
Fair. I don't know if I actually, now that they made the conference finals, I think that and alone, I think the Knicks like media push right now, if he had like a signature shoe out, I think the timing would have been amazing for just, even if like people aren't super fans of Brunson specifically, I think just being in that spot would naturally drive hype for something like that. But I think generally, I don't know how much, like you said, because of all the things you said, how much drive there is for a Brunson, how much demand there is for a Brunson signature itself. But I think now, if the Knicks are consistently in these positions, I think overall, just the Knicks trickle down to a Brunson shoe could work anyway. So I was gonna say I disagree, but I can see it.
Yeah, I think if they make it to the finals, I think that is, you gotta give it to him, because D Book made it to the finals, and I think shortly after that he got his own signature line. So hopefully we'll see if Brunson gets that same treatment.